I am 150% certain that there is life after death, and it's much more interesting, much more physical than this one. There are always people who say, well, maybe it's just hallucinations or people's imagination. Fine, yes, okay. But I believe there are many cases that are neither hallucinations nor imagination, but rather, they are real. For example, in Omri in the Dominican Republic, there was a woman who had separated from her husband, and he had passed away. He had died in Spain. One day she was sewing in her living room and suddenly, a cloud appeared in a corner of the room. This cloud began to form until a man emerged. It was her deceased ex-husband. He told her, "Don't be scared, I'm fine. Don't be scared. I've come to tell you that in such and such account at such and such bank," he gave her the account numbers, "there's some money you don't know about. Tell my children." And then he disappeared. The woman, understandably frightened, didn't know what to do for a while. They'll think I'm crazy, she thought. But eventually she told her children. They investigated, went to the bank, and indeed there was an account they knew nothing about. In 1982, which is when this happened, the account contained 300,000. So, of course, hallucinations or something strange just don't fit here. What does this mean? Simply that after life there is another life. We don't know what it's like, of course, but based on the evidence, on the clues I've gathered, it's much better than this one, infinitely better. I had an experience once. I didn't actually see anything. That is, no, I didn't see the tunnel that many people describe, no. I didn't see anything. I simply had a heart issue and they performed a catheterization, but unfortunately the catheter itself, the plastic, severed my aorta. I was, at that moment, 5 minutes away from crossing to the other side. What I can say about that near-death experience is that it felt like an extraordinarily sweet dream. It was very pleasant. I was aware that I was leaving, that I was falling asleep. Because in the end, death is sleep. And, well, then they brought me back, took me to an operating room and pulled me through. That wasn't the only time I've been, as far as I know, with 1 foot here and 1 foot there. Anyway, Estoy Bien is a book in which I recount many investigations involving people who have seen or spoken to friends or relatives who have passed away from all over the world. And it's truly spectacular. After gathering all this information, you can't have the slightest doubt. It's impossible for a man from Pittsburgh in the United States and a girl in Pakistan to coordinate and tell the same story. And they do, they both recount seeing their deceased relatives. In the Pittsburgh case, a professor's deceased friend and colleague appeared at his home to say something seemingly absurd. The professor who was alive was looking for a book of poems written by the deceased man. But he didn't know his friend had passed away. They lived in different cities, Pittsburgh and St. Louis. Suddenly, in the early hours, the deceased appeared and said, "The book you're looking for, my book is over there." And then he vanished. The professor was stunned, found the book, and shortly after, the phone rang. They informed him, "So-and-so has just died." All these stories, all these cases from around the world, lead me to believe that, indeed, after the sweet sleep of death, which is nothing more than a dream, you continue to live in a place with a physical body. Not as a spirit, no, a physical body. In my view, religions have failed to convey what is probably the truth. And the truth is that it's not about being good or bad, behaving well in life or not, to go to heaven or hell. No, it's none of that. All human beings, every single one, good, bad, believers, whatever, when they die, all of them go to the same place and remain alive. And no one judges them. Being good or bad is just a game within this existence, something we can't fully understand because our mental capacity is so small. And what lies on the other side is immense. Unfortunately, religions mislead people. That's why I always recommend, if you can, run from religion, escape from it. Think for yourself. I was presenting a book called El Enviado in Mexico City, on a primetime television program hosted by a well-known journalist named Pudowski. I was talking about the content of the book, specifically the Shroud of Turin, the discoveries made by scientists and so on. I think I conveyed a lot of enthusiasm when speaking about Jesus of Nazareth, who is supposedly the figure depicted on the Shroud of Turin. At the end of the program, I received a phone call. Someone identified themselves as a former U.S. Air Force officer and told me that they had something for me. I thought, U.S. Air Force, probably UFOs, and I agreed to meet with him. We made contact and I stayed in touch with him. Eventually I saw him again. He gave me a sort of puzzle that I had to solve in order to find what he wanted to give me. I managed to solve it and I came across a series of manuscripts. As I read them, I found myself delving into the true story of the life of Jesus of Nazareth. They claimed that the Americans had conducted an experiment and traveled back to the time of Jesus, following him step by step throughout his public life. That is the genesis, albeit a very condensed version, of Caballo de Troya. I have never been able to prove, and I've said this many times, whether or not the time travel experiment actually happened. But what truly matters to me is the account of Jesus. That is, the events of his public life, what happened and what he said, which has nothing to do with what religion tells you. What captivated me was this version of Jesus of Nazareth. Extraordinarily beautiful, extraordinarily relatable, and much more logical than what I have read in the Gospels. I was educated in a Catholic religious school and attended an Opus Dei university in Pamplona, Spain. However, life and journalism led me to doubt everything. Everything I had received in my education, especially the religious part, began to crumble. There were things that didn't add up, things I didn't understand or accept. When I discovered the information I received, I encountered, as I said, a completely different Jesus of Nazareth. It changed my internal compass, turning it 180 degrees. I stayed in contact with the Major for some time, both in person and through letters, until he passed away. Afterward, and I'm revealing this to your audience, I managed to make contact twice with the second pilot, Eliseo. As a result of that contact in Norway, I received a series of fascinating pieces of information. One of them is the conclusion of Jesus' public life, which was incomplete in the material given to me by the Major. 2 years and a bit were missing. This is the information I received from the second pilot, which completes the account of his public life. That information, I believe, was to be published in 2019. Eliseo's journal is very interesting because it complements the rest of Jesus' public life. The Major's narrative ends, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 28. Eliseo's account extends it to the year 30, detailing the events of those 2+ years. What happens, what Jesus says, and why he was ultimately killed. It's an intricate story, one I find both fascinating and enlightening. I believe this will be my last interview. Why? Because I feel that this phase of my life is over. I no longer wish to present books or participate in public events, to the extent possible. That is not my intention. In recent years, I've realized that everyone has a role in life. Everyone has a job, a contract, and they fulfill it whether they understand it or not. In my case, I believe the most important aspect of my life or work is to try to open people's minds. Through books and words. To open human minds to the reality that there are other worlds, other civilizations beyond Earth, that Jesus of Nazareth is far more than what you've been told, and, of course, that there is life after death. One must have hope. Hope no matter what happens, no matter what you experience or how poorly you may live. After death you will continue to live. When I conducted that research, I analyzed all the factors available to me. At first I thought, it could have been a comet. But that's highly unlikely because 3 months is too long a time to view a comet. Secondly, a comet is far away, its visibility is distant. Thirdly, it's highly improbable that it could guide you along a path, as in the region of Ur of the Chaldees, Babylon, and on to Bethlehem. Moreover, people only traveled by day back then. Traveling at night wasn't common, it was dangerous. So how is it possible to see during the day a luminous object, a star or a conjunction? One theory suggests it was a conjunction of 2 or 3 planets. No, because that happens at night, not during the day. Moreover, a conjunction doesn't lead you anywhere. I studied various reasons and arguments, and they all concluded that it couldn't have been any of those. It had to have been a bright object that guided them during the day to a location. The Gospel even says that when they reached the house where the child was, in Bethlehem, it stopped above the house. What was that? What we now investigate and identify as an unidentified flying object. This doesn't diminish its significance. I believe that many of the civilizations visiting us, or that have visited us, are in the service of the divine. To simplify, they are angels. I come across wonderful surprises, very beautiful ones, from very serious people who have experienced things either in reality or in dreams. Dreams are also very important. Just yesterday I was talking to a man, a doctor, who told me, at a certain moment I had a dream and an angel, a luminous creature dressed all in white, told me, tell your mother that the girl who will be born must be named Gracia, not Maria. The angel insisted and repeated this. When he woke up, he went to see his mother, who, as it turned out, was about to give birth. This was a time when the baby's sex couldn't be known in advance. A girl was born and they named her Gracia. These kinds of occurrences are quite frequent. Sometimes angels, beings, or creatures like these even save people's lives. For instance, imagine someone sitting on a cliff, with the sea below them. Suddenly, a luminous figure appears in the air and says, Fulanito, move back from there. The man, startled and scared, gets up and moves away. Just seconds later the cliff collapses and he would have been killed. There's a region in Spain near Portugal called Los Huds. It's much better now, but years ago it was very neglected, scattered hamlets and underdeveloped. Strange beings began to appear there. I went to investigate right away. The locals, very humble and simple people, told me they had seen black-clad creatures rising out of the ground. These beings naturally terrified them. The local farmers even threw stones at them. One of the most interesting cases in that book, at least for me, involves a man I met. Well, I don't believe in coincidences. Many years ago, I was conducting research in northern Spain, traveling from one place to another. A man stopped me hitchhiking. I picked him up, which I don't usually do for safety reasons. We started talking and he asked, "Do you believe in UFOs?" I replied, "A little." He then shared an experience he had in a village in La Rioja, Spain. He told me he had been a member of the terrorist group ETA. At one point he encountered 3 beings wearing hoods, which were also blood-stained. The sight left such an impression on him that he abandoned his weapons, left ETA, and turned away from terrorism. His life completely changed. I also investigated a case here in Colombia, though I couldn't finish it due to circumstances you likely know better than I do, because of the guerrillas. Years ago, the guerrillas heard an explosion and went to a hill. There they found a large area covered in debris, metallic remains. Thinking it was a U.S. helicopter or airplane, they approached and saw, if I remember correctly, 3 very tall beings in tight suits. One was dead and the other 2 were alive. Assuming they were Americans, they tried to communicate, but the beings didn't speak English or any language the guerrillas could understand. They captured them, tied them up, and tortured them. The beings didn't scream, lament, or make any sound. One of them eventually died. The guerrillas hung the last one upside down from a tree. One of the guerrillas, who later left the group, felt pity for this being and, at a certain moment during the night, shot him. He said the entire jungle around them turned green. That's the story in summary. I thought, it would be fascinating to visit that place, try to find remnants, and determine what happened to the bodies. But, as I mentioned, it wasn't possible due to the circumstances. There are thousands of cases. These are 46 years of research. Nearly every single day spent investigating. It's very difficult to choose. I'll share those that come to mind. One of the most spectacular cases I recall also happened in Colombia, involving a group of 4 boys in Cali. They were playing marbles by the river when they saw what they thought was a horse in the water. Suddenly, the horse turned around and approached the shore. To their astonishment, it was a centaur over 2 meters tall. The centaur approached, but there seemed to be a kind of wall of water that prevented it from coming closer. This figure, with a reddish beard, very muscular and athletic, tried to pass through the barrier but couldn't. He began speaking in a language the boys couldn't identify. As this was happening, 3 beings appeared behind that watery curtain where the centaur was. They crossed through the barrier, 2 men and a woman. The 2 men turned around, went back through the curtain, grabbed the centaur by the arms and took him away. They disappeared. The woman then turned to the boys and said that this shouldn't have happened, apologizing to them. For me, this case, though very summarized, is fascinating. First, I believe it's true, the boys aren't lying. Second, it opens the door to examining mythology in a different way. Maybe mythology isn't just mythology. Another case I remember, I started investigating Roswell many years ago when I first learned about it. I discovered that an aeronautical engineer was, at one point, taken along with other engineers to a secret location. The military had blindfolded and drugged them, so they didn't know if they were in Nevada or Arizona. They spent 2 weeks there trying to operate various pieces of equipment. Each morning they entered a hangar where they were given a piece of equipment. Suspended in the air by cables in the hangar was a military aircraft. The engineers would enter the cockpit and test if the equipment they were given had any function. He was given 5 pieces and he only figured out the purpose of one of them. What was it for? When installed in a certain spot and activated through a computer, the engineers will alone controlled it. The airplane's wings or fuselage could bend at will, without the need for cables or hydraulic systems. Where did this piece come from? From the craft that crashed at Roswell. In other words, they are still researching and extracting components from the Roswell crash, attempting to utilize its technology. At one point he was riding a motorcycle from one place to another during the day, and the bike suddenly stopped. He saw, very close in front of him, 2 beings. One was taller than the other, both wearing suits resembling those of Michelin. He was deeply affected by the sight because similar cases have been reported on Reunion Island. There have been occurrences in different parts of the world and these beings are likely astronauts. On Reunion Island there were several such encounters, but there are many other locations too. I remember another case involving a married couple driving in their car. They were returning from visiting their son at a military camp. On the side of the road they saw a figure in something like a Michelin suit, but it was floating, levitating above the asphalt. They were gripped by terrible panic. As they drove past it, the car's battery died. Clearly these were non-human beings. There are hundreds of civilizations. Not just one, but hundreds of distinct civilizations. Where do they come from? It's all conjecture. The more you investigate, the less you know. They could come from our galaxy, from other galaxies, or even from dimensions we have yet to comprehend. I know what science says: it's impossible, they can't come because it's too far and it would take years and years. That may be true, according to the human concept of travel. But the human concept of travel evolves over time. What does this mean? It means they have a way of traveling that is entirely different from ours, something we cannot yet conceive. How can we possibly know what science will look like 500 years from now? It's impossible. On November 11, 1979, a passenger plane was flying non-stop from the Balearic Islands to the Canary Islands. There were 109 passengers aboard. At a certain point, as they flew over the Mediterranean, an object appeared to their left and began accompanying the plane. The pilot logically contacted air traffic control to ask if there was any nearby traffic. The response was, "Negative, no, there's no traffic." "Well, I have something here on my left, 3 objects or 1 object with 3 lights. It's getting very close and I don't know what it is." "Oh well, we don't know anything about it." The confusion among the control towers ensued. The pilot, exercising sound judgment, decided, "Look, I'm going to land in Manises in Valencia's airport because I don't know what this is and for safety I'm landing." He landed, and indeed the people at the airport saw several, not just one, several lights above the airport. Minutes later, a military jet took off from the Los Llanos Air Base, further south in Albacete. For over an hour, the pilot, Fernando Camara, tried to intercept one of these objects. He told me, "It was impossible. What's more, whenever I tried to film it, my camera was disabled. A fraction of a second before I pressed the button, it was already disabled. When I tried to arm the missiles, they were already disarmed. When I tried to activate the radar was already non-functional. What they call collimating, targeting, was preempted. Before he pressed anything, they had already read his thoughts. This case is emblematic, at least in Spain. It's now considered a classic." "Did you speak with the pilot?" Yes, many times. He had to make a formal statement, submit a report. By the way, when the case was declassified in 1992, this incident occurred in 1979, it turned out that the pilot's report was missing. It wasn't included. In other words, the declassification of UFO files by the Spanish Air Force was a joke. The best cases weren't disclosed, and the ones that were had been heavily censored. This happens in every country. Don't believe in any country's so-called declassification of UFO cases because what they release is second-rate and heavily edited. The real cases never come to light. The U.S. Air Force continues its secret investigations. The claim that the Blue Book project ended in 1969 is a lie. NASA continues investigating. NASA belongs to the military, it's not a civilian organization. And the military continues researching wherever they need to. American embassies still transmit UFO reports to the United States. Governments, the military. Governments generally have no idea what is going on, or they know very little. It's the military that truly has the knowledge and understands what is happening. I believe there are several reasons for this. In my view, the most important reason is that they know exactly what the UFO phenomenon is. They have known for 70 years. They have evidence, they have crashed crafts, they have beings, and they have every type of testimony imaginable. So, what happens if I, as a US or Russian military official, it doesn't matter which, tell the taxpayer? It's true, there are crafts, there's technology, and there are civilizations that are 10,000 years, or however many, ahead of us, and we can't do anything about them. In fact, they constantly invade Spanish airspace or that of any other country, and the radar systems detect them. What could the taxpayer say to the military? Then why am I paying your salary? Why am I funding the defense system if you can't defend me? I don't know whether they're peaceful or not, but you can't protect me. This is the fundamental reason for concealing and denying the phenomenon, because the military would lose their authority. I'm not saying all military personnel are like this, but the leadership certainly is. The second reason, it would create utter pandemonium. It would be chaos. Everyone would start asking questions, not out of fear but out of logic. For instance, is their religion the same as ours? Is their culture similar? Is their medicine comparable? What about their economy? And so on. It would be chaos.